Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're sitting today. As Ashley mentioned, we're going to really spend the next 55 minutes or so here looking at Microsoft Dynamics GP, or what used to be called Great Plains back in the day. We won't get through everything. Obviously, there's 60 different modules, and we won't have time to drill into most of those. But what I do want to show you today is kind of an overview of how the system looks and feels, and some of the things that you can do with it. And mostly in the financial system, but certainly if you have questions or you want to see something more, we can always do that for you on a one-off basis. And so I've logged in. You should be able to see my screen. And I usually like to point out that I'm logged in as a system administrator. And so that's important because that means there's really no security being applied to my account today. And in real life, obviously different people have things locked down that they may or may not be able to get into at certain times. But I am logged in as the sysadmin, and so there's no restrictions whatsoever on where I can go, what I can do, reports I can view, and screens I can get to, and so forth. So just keep that in mind, that everything is unlocked. You'll probably see a bunch of stuff on some of the menus that you might say, oh, I don't need that, or I wouldn't use that. Well, that's fine. I also happen to have really all 60 of those modules installed. And so if you see something that looks interesting there, and you want to ask about it at the end, that's fine. Well, again, certainly follow it, or happy to do a follow-up presentation if needed for anyone that's on the line here. So when the user logs in, they do land at their home page, and that's what you're seeing here on my screen today is the system admin up here. This would normally be your name, but that's going to say the system admin's homepage, and the homepage is configurable by user. So every user, depending on their role and their security, will have different things that they pull onto their homepage. And really their homepage is really just a landing spot for each user to create their own kind of personalized menu system of those tasks or those things that they do every day. Could be reports that they run frequently, or different screens they go in and out of on a regular basis. It could be the system kind of telling us what's happening under the hood, so to speak, instead of us running a report or doing some kind of an inquiry. Those things are very similar to that we work with. Think of it as your own personalized menu system inside of the software. And so the other thing that I like to point out early on is Microsoft always provides more than one way to get to a particular place or to do a certain task. Because the software has been around for a number of years, there's kind of what I'd call the older style reports and older style menus to get to things. You see those kind of up here along the top. So if I want to run a report, for example, I can use the traditional kind of cascading menu here and go into purchasing, and then I've got some other options. If I open this trial balance, then I have even more options. And so that's kind of how the software was originally built, how we got to screens and reports. And those methods are still there. Some people that have used the software for a long time kind of grew up with those and like those. Your homepage, of course, is the more modern way to get to things that you work on. And then a little later on in the presentation, we'll actually move off of our homepage onto some of the other area pages and see yet another way to take action inside of the system. And so Microsoft realizes that we don't all work the same way. We need to get to the same end goal, but we do things differently. And so they do a pretty good job of giving us choices. And so kind of looking at my homepage here, the area up in the top left is called Reminders. And by the way, when I say top left, if you don't like it there and you want your reminder area, if you're using it someplace else, you'll see it's very easy to drag these things around and drop them anywhere you want. And so these are all kind of tiles on the page, and you decide which ones you want and then where you'd like those placed. So the reminder area really allows us to have the software kind of do some thinking for us. And you'll see here, I've got vendor balances. Here I did something for an HR presentation where we have people tracking TV shots, and so when those might be coming due. And so you'll notice that I have an option here of looking at visual cues or kind of hyperlinks. And so if I look, for example, for customers over their credit limit, you'll see that I've got 7 here based on what's being presented on my homepage. Well, I could run a report, so I could do the traditional thing, or some people now call it the old-fashioned way. You could go get a report and you could look at it and see who's over their credit limit and highlight it, and then decide you need to call them, or maybe you just need to review their credit and decide you want to change it. And certainly that's one way to do it. That worked well in the 80s and into the 90s. You can still do it today, but really a more modern way or more efficient way to do it is to have the system kind of test for those conditions and then present to you as the user when that condition exists. And so here you'll see that on my home page, I have a visual cue here, or a hyperlink, that customers over their credit limit, there's 7 of them. And so I can click on that. It opens another window. You see in this window is called SmartList up here, and this is a very powerful query tool for all users to use. And then those 7 customers are in fact presented. And so if here I wanted to send a letter out to these folks, for example, I can use Microsoft Word, and I could prepare a customer letter. It senses that it's looking at customer data versus vendors or employees or inventory items and so forth. And there's about 50 or 60 of these letter templates that come with the system. If you know anything about Microsoft, you're not limited to what they've done. You can create unlimited letter templates of your own. You can edit theirs if you kind of like it, but you want to change up some wording or maybe add some things to it. You can certainly do that. These are Word templates, so most of us are pretty comfortable now working in Word today. Or you could just totally ignore theirs and just create thousands of your own. So there is an adjustment to the credit limit letter template, and these are the 7 people. So when I select that template, it's pulling the people off the list. Well, maybe I'm not going to address it with these guys. So really, I just want these 5 letters. And then kind of how would you like those letters signed if we're going to send these out. And so when I click finish here, the system does a mail merge between my accounting or ERP data and Microsoft Word, and there they are. And so here I should have the 5 templates. Now I did make one edit to this template just to show someone a while back how easy it was. And so the line that you see right there in red, in the first letter, I added that line to the template. So that didn't come from the factory, so to speak. Everything else is right out of the box. But you see, it's just it's a Word document, and at this point they are Word documents. And so anything we would want to do, of course, this is my company name today, so this would be your name. A lot of people put logos up here and so forth. But anything that you would normally do in Word, you have that capability. And so totally up to you on what happens here. And so you'll see that it did sign a letter, at least put a spot in there for my signature if I choose to actually put a signature on it. And I have 5 of them, so those 5 that were in my SmartList query there. And so at this point I'd send those out, or print them or scan them, email them, fax them, whatever it is, drop them in the mail. However I would normally communicate with these customers, I would send those out. And so since we're in SmartList here, though, let's take a little bit of a look behind the scenes. And so I navigated from my home page into the SmartList. So that was really just one click, and then this data populated. Now, if things change, so if the credit limit goes up and I'm no longer over on a particular customer, well, that customer then would drop off the list because that condition wouldn't exist anymore. If they paid and their balance came down below their credit limit, then of course they would drop off the list. So this is a dynamically changing kind of minute by minute view of the data. But we can do other things with this. And so when I click kind of behind the scenes, so you see now, and again, remember I've got complete access to everything here. So when you see the kind of behind the curtain, I have access into a lot of other areas of the system. And so we were in sales. I can go into my purchasing folder and maybe look at a vendor list, for example, and you'll notice I have a number of things already happening here. You'll see some with stars on the end, the asterisk. Those Microsoft ships with the system. The ones that don't have an asterisk, I actually created. And so let me show you how it is how simple it is to create one of your own. So here's just a simple vendor list. This, is not much value, and unless we're going to send out a holiday card or something, just a list of vendor names and addresses. So, well, let's do a little something with this. And so I can use the columns button, and I don't know what this node is, so just says vendor, and I'm going to take that off, and I mean, I really don't know what that is, so I don't know, I have no clue what that means. But and I don't know vendors really by their ID. I kind of know them by name, so I don't really care to see their ID, kind of how we're recording them in the database. So I'm going to clean this up, but then I want to go through and add some things. So I click on the add button, and maybe I want to see if I have enough information to print a 1099 for these vendors. So I'll grab the 1099 amount, since that's right here on top, and then the 1099 type. So that might be helpful. And then let me just see if I have their tax ID number, because as we get close to the end of the year here, that might be kind of important. So here, what I want the software to do, and I'm going to you'll see me moving that tax ID number up there by the vendor name. So I don't want it at the back of my list. I want it right up here at the front. What I want to do is see, have I paid these guys a lot of money? And I would normally have to issue them a 1099 at the end of the year out of the software. And maybe I don't have their tax number in there. So, well, it might be on my desk, but maybe I just don't have it. And so here, this is, not too bad. I've got 102 of these total. So, you could have 102,000 in your vendor file. And so this is good information, but, you see it's kind of hit and miss. I've got some vendors that are flagged to get a 1099. I've got a lot that do not. And really what I want to do is just kind of narrow the focus here on those that might be a problem. And I don't care about these that I either haven't paid any money or they're not even flagged for a 1099. So then I can use the search feature here, and I can put up to 4 different layers or levels of search on this. And so the first thing I'm going to do is say, well, maybe if I am even sending them a tax form. And so, we've got all of the traditional options here. So begins with, is not, matches exactly, contains, is less than. So pretty much anything you need to, get to the data. And so I'm going to say if this, if the vendor has a 1099 set to miscellaneous, and then really, if I paid them more money, because just because they're flagged as a 1099 vendor doesn't mean that I'll actually have to, send them a tax form. And so, so I'm going to say if it's greater than $600, because that's really what I care about. And then I want to see, do I have any problems? So is this tax ID number, and I'm just going to say is equal to, and then I'm going to leave it blank, so the system can check and see that I'm looking for it, but if it's not there, I want to know about it. So if it's there, I don't care. I don't want those in the way. And so then we can click OK, and we'll see here that I do have a much more manageable list here. And so because we're just querying data, we're not hurting anything, we're not writing anything back into the system, we're just pulling data out. And at this point, I won't go through it, but because I am in the vendor file, I could now prepare a vendor letter. And the same idea here is there's a handful here that ship with the system. There is a request for a W-9, and so I could send a letter out to these guys with the W-9 and collect their tax ID here before the end of the year. And so we looked at that same kind of process with sales. And so, this is a nice way to have the system kind of tell us what's happening instead of us having to kind of go figure it out all the time. And so we could save this so we don't have to rebuild this every time, and give it a call or give it a name, whatever we might want to come up with here. And so we'll just say demo 1099 list, and then I can make that available to everybody. So everybody in the whole system, just people that work in my company or people that have similar roles. So maybe just payables people or accounting folks, or I could make it available just to me so that no one else can see it. And then I can add that as a favorite. And if I add it as a favorite and a reminder, then that puts it on my home page so that I don't have to even go look for this. If the conditions exist, it shows up on my homepage. If all of these vendors have their tax number in the system, then the the message goes away because there are no vendors that fit the bill here. And so I'm just going to say if the number of records is greater than 0, then I want it to show up. And I'm going to say I want to display it as a visual cue, so just for something different. And so then let me just kind of force that page to refresh here. So I'll just move off and back on. And we'll see now that we have 3 of these up here. And there's my demo 1099 list. It says I have 7 vendors that meet that criteria. And because I did a visual cue, it puts a little icon up here. So I can click on that, and then that immediately opens the list, and then I can work on the list. The other thing I can do, again, based on my security, is if I want to drill back into any one of these vendors, I can highlight it, and I can use the go to here, and you'll see all the different links that are available for me. And of course, you can create your own links. You can create your own list here. You can create your own drill backs. And so it's really a very, very flexible tool when it comes to reporting. And this is how a lot of people really like to do the reporting nowadays. And so we saw kind of the word integration. Let's move up to the financial, and we'll look just for 30 seconds here on maybe grab the account transactions. And so here's just a dump of transactions from a lot of different times and accounts. And of course, you do have the Excel functionality here, so you can sort on any of these columns. If you want to sort all your debits together, you can't really do that on a paper report where you just print a trial balance or a general ledger. So if you're looking for a particular transaction, maybe it was $50. Well, you know, there's a few $50 debits. No, that's not it. Well, I can sort the credits the same way, and you know, that's much faster than printing a report and having to scan through it and try to figure out you know, where an entry might be and so forth. So if you get a list here, whatever it might be that you want to work with in a little more detail, you can do that by just clicking the Excel button. And Dynamics GP will do an integration with Excel, and it's dumping that over into Excel. That opened on my other screen here. So here's everything that we were looking at in the window now in Excel. And I do have my decimals set up to 5 places here. So just most people use dollars and cents, but I do have mine set up just so people can see that we can get a little more precise if we need to. So once you're in Excel, you know, it's Excel. You can do anything you'd normally do, totals and graphing or charts or anything like that. So anything is fair game here once it gets over into Excel. And again, you're not hurting anything if you come in and say, you know, well, I don't want to see these particular rows for whatever reason, I'm just going to delete those. Well, that doesn't do anything to your Dynamics GP data. That's just Excel data at this point. And so a very powerful reporting tool here in the SmartList. I usually spend a little bit more time on that than everything else just because that is such a popular and easy to use tool. You'll see in, you know, about 5 minutes you can typically learn how to use that tool. So let's move on here. Moving over to the right, we see the Business Analyzer window here. Now I'm going to make that one a little larger, and you'll see based on my personal preferences, I have the rest of those windows now tucked over to the right. Some people like them to the left or the bottom. That's fine. I have mine going to the right. The Business Analyzer is yet another way to look at the data that's in the system. And this is a combination of a couple hundred charts and graphs and kind of key performance indicators. Some of it's raw data, kind of like you see here, but a lot of it's highly summarized. And yes, I could run a receivables aging and get to this information, and I could run another receivables aging and for last year and get to that information and do some comparisons, maybe in Excel or maybe on my calculator. But the Business Analyzer piece actually has a lot of very intuitive, kind of pretty modern report captions here for us to use. And same rule applies here. There's a couple hundred of these that are available out of the box. You can edit anything Microsoft has done to your own liking. You can create unlimited Business Analyzer reports yourself. Or you could use those just the way they come from the factory, so to speak, which is what you're seeing here on my screen. So I haven't touched any of these at all. And so I've got a few of these pulled on. So here's a cash position graph. Now, you know, for a CFO or CEO, this sometimes is kind of nice. They don't necessarily need to see every single penny, that's on the report, but just kind of where things stand. And so it looks like my cash last year was not doing so good. This year looks a whole lot better. And so, I don't need to know the exact amount, just this is a good thing. We're going in the right direction here. Again, here's more of the raw data, but again, not every transaction, just where things stand. And so you'll see I'm up almost 2,500%. So when you're talking about cash, that's always got to be a good thing. Different types of formats that you can apply to the data. A simple chart or graph or actual raw data. Here's kind of more of a speedometer type dial where you just see a number and really no detail. I don't like that one myself, but it is available. And then there's things like this heat map, we call it, where we're really just looking at customer sales, in this case, by state. Well, sometimes you only do business in one state, so maybe you want to look at it by county or by zip code. All of that's very easily doable and changed. You could use the same template and just drop off the other states. And so these are just examples of what you could do. Here's yet another format where I'm looking at my top 10 items by sales dollars, so over the past 30 days. So, you can imagine an executive level person, again, you don't necessarily want to see every single transaction, but just what are the top selling items here in the last month, and so the last 30 days, and based on the date, your system date, then this graph would change accordingly. And so, and then we come back to the beginning. So these are nice, and this is really super nice if you're a Dynamics GP user. But over the years, Microsoft has had a lot of requests that, hey, people really want to see these charts and graphs, and they wouldn't otherwise log into the software. So how do we do that? Well, they're all available through a browser, and so if I open the window here, so you'll see now I'm running this, and if there's any technical folks on the line, this will look familiar. These are our SQL Server Reporting Services reports, and so SSRS, as we say. And so because they do open in a browser, they can also be available in on any device. So if you run an iPhone or an iPad or an Android phone, you can view all of these on any device. These are not at all Windows specific. They run in Chrome, they run in virtually any browser. I happen to be using Internet Explorer on this machine, but they work beautifully in Chrome as well. And so here's my company that we're using today. Here are all the different kind of modules, if you will, or components of the system. And so we were in the financial area. You'll notice that there are a number of reports here that I could run. So if I want to run trial balances or general ledgers or aged payables or receivables or inventory movement or inventory on hand kind of stock status, all those reports are already out here. Can be run through a browser, which means they can be run on a phone as long as you have a connection back to the network. So we need to know who you are and to get the right security and to make these available. So you can get a lot of information. Virtually anything in the system you can push out to people that are not users of the software. And so this saves the boss from calling, hey, I'm going into a meeting in 5 minutes. Can you update these 50 reports for me? I got to have them right now in 5 minutes. And so, that's never a fun call to get. Well, with things like this, they don't really need to call accounting. They just need to go get the current version of the report. So if I go into the charts and graphs area, so you see all the charts and graphs and kind of key performance indicators. These are the pretty things instead of just the reports that are available just in the financial area. So hardcore accounting stuff, fixed assets, banking reports, and so on. And so if I look for the cash position KPI, I think this is the one we're running. Yeah, so you can see here now the report that, let me go back to my GP and bring that one back up on the screen. So you can kind of see here, I'm getting the exact same version of the report, regardless of where I might be running that from. And so it's just coincidental that I'm a GP user and I have access to pull in this data. And so I've plugged that onto my my homepage. But if I'm not a GP user, don't even have to know what we're running kind of in the background. I can still get to the same data on any device, anywhere, anytime, as long as I'm connected in to the network. And so this is another very popular reporting tool for people both in and outside of the software. Okay, so now we move kind of into the quick links. These are just things that we work with every day. So if you think about the different screens that we might go in, these are shortcuts into the windows. Yes, we could go to the old style transactions, and if we were going to do a journal entry, get to, with a couple of clicks, get in there. Maybe we're going to enter a vendor invoice, and when you're new to the system, it's, oh yeah, there's a lot of options here. Where would that be? Oh, I don't remember. And so, this really saves mouse clicks when we put those things that we use. I say you would put those things on your home page that you use every day. And with one click, then you can open any of these windows. So if I want to go into what we call unit accounts, as an example, so here we have the ability to track things other than dollars and cents. So the accounting system is generally based on debits and credits. At the end of the day, back in the general ledger, well, we also track unit accounts. So what's a unit account? Well, it's anything that's not financial. So here I've got employee counts that I'm tracking, and I'll bring up the list here so you can see all the different unit accounts that I actually have in my system here. Things like head count, the number of fixed assets, square footage is a popular one, anything you can imagine that is not dollars and cents. So in healthcare, the obvious is the number of cases, number of treatments, patient days, if we're an inpatient facility, number of feet sold, the actual number of product sales, which actually we do track that, but it's really up to your imagination on what you want to track that is not financial related. And so, okay, well, that's good. Why would we do that? What would we do? Well, we can pull those into financial reports. So if we want to take sales and divide it by, square footage, or sales divided by head count, we can do that very easily in the financial reporting system, and that's pretty popular. But we can also do allocations with those unit accounts. And so a couple of kinds of allocations here. I'll look at the simplest one first. This is a fixed allocation, and what this means is that every month that when we pay our rent, we really want to post that, we want to spread that amongst different departments or divisions or whatever it might be. And you'll see kind of in my sample chart of accounts here that my different divisions are, I've got 1 through 6. And my account structure is set up with kind of a 3-digit, and then a 4, and then a 2. And that's just an example. There's actually room for 66 alphanumeric characters in the chart of accounts, and 10 different segments. Where I'm using 3, you could have 10. Now, if you wanted to do 66 and 10, I'd personally challenge you a little bit on that, and suggest maybe you don't need to be quite that aggressive with your chart, but that is the capability of Dynamics GP. And so, but it's not uncommon for people to have 4, 5, 6 different segments, and 20 to 40 characters in their chart is not that unusual. And of course, you're never typing these numbers in. You're really just picking them from a list. You're looking up, you're grabbing them by name. You're really never typing all of that. And so you don't have to worry about trying to key all of that. Nobody really does that, but you could if you wanted to. So in this type of allocation, it's fixed, which means every month these percentages will be applied. So when I pay rent and I put it into this kind of administrative account 0006180, you'll see that the system is then going to reallocate that into all of the different kind of departments or divisions 1 through 6 here, based on these percentages. And so it'll do that until I go in and change those percentages. So the opposite of that is a variable allocation. And so a variable allocation means we still want to post things into the same 6 different departments or divisions, in this case utilities, but we're not going to fix that every month. We're actually going to look to something else to figure out how much to put into department 100, 200, 300, and so on. Well, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at one of those unit accounts, and so there comes my head count screen up, and so here for the month of September, which I don't have an entry for, I only have April here, so period 4. Here we're going to look to the month and find, well, how many people were in department 100, and we're going to take that over the total. And there's department 500, and so I don't have a unit account for every department, but you kind of get the idea. There's department 800, which I'm actually not posting to over here on the left. And so this really is where we can use these unit accounts. There's my 200 back, and so we'll take the employees in 200 for the month divided by the total of all employees, so all unit accounts that are employee-based. And then we'll figure out what that percent is. We'll apply that to utilities, and then the system will make the allocation into the different general ledger accounts for me. And so that's why it's called variable, because it does vary on a monthly basis. And of course, you can make entries into those unit accounts to update those numbers. The next thing, just kind of working down the list here a little bit, we're obviously not going to go into all of this, but cash flow projecting, sometimes folks like to do that. And so here's my cash flow calendar for the month of April. We see here kind of a simple grid. So red means that there's more money going out on that day than coming in. Blue is the opposite. Blue is good, so more money coming in than what's going out. And then, of course, black is just kind of the running cash balance. So, well, April, pretty uneventful there. Let's toggle over to what May looked like. Some more activity here in May. Looks like mostly red, but here's a nice blue, which means I've got 43,775 expected in on May 1st. Well, I wonder what that is. So when I click on it, that takes me down to the detail, and I can kind of look and see, well, do I have any receivables being collected? Doesn't look like it. Do I have any payables being paid? Well, I've got a couple here in a batch. So you see here, open is posted but not paid, and of course work is just sitting there in a batch. And so I've got 2 here that if I post this batch, they're actually going to go on in and be ready for payment. And you'll see here that these were April invoices due on May 1st, just typical 30-day terms there. Well, I wonder what this $5,000 is. So I can drill down on that. That takes me back to kind of a grayed out screen, so I can't edit it here. I'm just looking, and I can see, oh yeah, okay, that looks like I knew about that. That was rent or whatever it might be. So looks okay. Well, I wonder where that's getting posted. So I could go into the distributions, and I could see that, oh yeah, that's actually going into that 6180 account. So that is going to get allocated into all of those other accounts. So that was our fixed allocation, if you remember, the rent. And so when I post this, it won't actually post into the 000. It'll take that 5,000 and slice it up into my departments or divisions 1 through 6 based on those fixed percentages that I have in my setup there. So, okay, yeah, that's rent. I guess that is going to happen. Well, okay, that's $6,225 going out. We must have something coming in. So if I look under the cash flow management transactions, oh yeah, okay, so here's a drawdown on my line of credit. Well, that's not in receivables, and that's not in the general ledger. It's just I'm expecting that money to come in. And so I do have a screen here where I can go in and put things that affect my cash that are not yet in the system. It's just what might happen in the future. And so payables and receivables, pretty easy to grab from the software, but things that affect balance sheet accounts, maybe I'm buying a piece of equipment on May 12th, maybe I'm expecting to draw down on my line on May 1st. And so, you know, if we net that out, that 50,000 with what's sitting in a batch here, the 6225, that's why the cash flow projection calendar is showing me that if you do all those things, if you pay those 2 bills when they're due, and if you do draw down from your bank line on the 1st, then you should have a net increase in your checkbook balance here of almost $44,000. And so, and of course you can print this stuff off. You see kind of the traditional office style ribbon up here where all the commands are. So nothing unusual there. We get into reporting, and again, yet another, these are the old style reports. Those reports that I might print off the menu style reports, I can put onto my home page, and with one click, I can execute those. And so these are the traditional reports. There's no drill down or drill back. They're just static, kind of meant to put something on paper. And so this is my aged accounts payable. So this is, what I owe the vendors, kind of aged out. Of course, all my data is here, getting pretty old. But if I do run these reports, and there's 1,000 or so of these on the menu, depending on which modules you actually deploy. You can modify them. So if you don't like the way Microsoft has put this together, you want to rearrange the columns or take something off or put something on, easily done. You can send these out in PDF if you have the ability to create a PDF here. You can bundle it up, and Dynamics will create a PDF based on your PDF creator, whatever it might be on the computer, and package that up so you can email it out. You could send it out in text, although those don't never look very good. Or if you decide you do want something on paper, you can click on the print button, and any printer that this computer sees, local network across the country or world, whatever, you would normally print from Word or Excel or any other Windows application would be available, and then you could send this out to the printer if you do actually have to get a hard copy. Oh, there's a back page of it. And so these are the two shortcut areas, quick links. Open the windows that you work on with one click. My reports will generate reports that you run regularly, again, with one click. So those things that you do on your regular day job, you pull onto your home page, and you have your own customized menu and shortcut there. So kind of down at the bottom, with the payroll and HR system, you do have the ability to provide to people if you want your employees to log in. And by the way, there's a very small, inexpensive way for them to do it and only kind of get to their payroll and HR information without anything else being exposed. But here, is a W-2. And so maybe you've got somebody, one of your employees is at the bank Saturday afternoon wanting to borrow money for a car. They need a copy of their W-2 for the last couple years. And so, of course, the office is closed, but they could log in right there and retrieve that right off their homepage and send that out, or maybe email that out to the loan officer, or car dealer, whatever it might be, and everything proceeds as expected. So there's time entry that is also available at that very light, inexpensive user account as well. And so if you did use the time feature here, or payroll, Dynamics does come with that part of the system. So you're seeing here a little bit why we use servers and not little laptops to install this on. So mine's running off my laptop. So here's a time card, kind of gives me, as the employee here, kind of gives me a snapshot of the time that I have entered on this particular time card. I don't have too many more in there, so I've got a couple, but that's it. Of course, I could drill back on that time card and open it up and continue to enter or fix it. You'll see that there's a workflow attached to the time cards that they can be approved, or in this case, I sent this in and let it reject a few times so that you could see that we do track all of the workflow steps. So, if this person sends it in to the boss or the supervisor, if it gets approved, we track that. If it's rejected for whatever reason, that's tracked, and those rejection errors are a permanent part of this transaction until it is approved or there's some resolution on it. And so that's all part of the core system here. Let's flip over to the requisition area here. So we do have a requisition system built in, and again, you can do this with a very light kind of employee low-cost license, where an employee could log in and create a requisition that again goes through the workflow to be approved or not, and then eventually automatically converted to a purchase order. And so as you see some of the windows opening and closing here, you'll notice there's some red fields and some blue. Well, the red are required, so if you're going to do something with this, you have to at least fill out those red fields. Now, I have that turned on as red. That's just an option. it's good when you're learning the system. Sometimes, after a few years, you don't want to see it in red. So, or maybe you're colorblind and you can't see it anyway. You can turn those any color you want, or just turn them back to black. So the blue, that just means there's more information. And so you can drill down on any of these. So you'll see the looking glasses here. So for example, if I want to see what sites or locations I have access to, well, these are the sites or the inventory locations that that my particular user account has access to. If I had security, I could actually work on the location, and I do. Remember, I'm logged in as a system admin. And so here, I could drill back and I could actually make a change to our site. So maybe our fax number just changed and it hasn't been updated yet, or, there's, I want to add a extra phone number or something. Anything that I have access to do, I can actually work kind of on the list as I'm entering this transaction. And so this transaction, again, has been sent out to the workflow. There was not an approver, so as many times as I sent it out, it just kind of died off because it couldn't find out where to go in my little test environment here. And so you see that just like the time card, that this requisition is, all the rejections are being built up along with that as well. And so okay, the one thing I was going to show you very quickly about payroll and forgot was my time management app, and so you'll notice that that is an app. So that's running kind of in a separate window. And here, users could, and think about this being on their phone or their tablet, users could come in and say, hey, if I'm going to be sick tomorrow, which I know that never happens, that you pre-plan your sick days, right? So I could put that in as 8 hours of sick time, and then from this app, there's also workflow that would send this along to my supervisor based on my setup, so that they could approve this more likely vacation time instead of sick time. So if I say, I really want to get sick time off there, well, maybe I'm not going to take a full day, I'm just going to take a half a day tomorrow type thing. And so I can plug that on there, and then this would go on to my higher up to be able to approve or deny that. And so this is unique to me, so I can see my balance over here, my vacation and sick balance, kind of what's in the bank. I can see other time PTO type reports that I have, or screens here that I've submitted, and I've got all my history here, so I can go back and look and say, oh, I didn't think I took a day off 6 months ago. I could go back to that calendar, and sure enough, I could see that. And so we can toggle back and forth here to any point in time. So that little app does come with the system as well. So really at this point, the last little bit here, I want to move off of my home page and kind of show you some of the area pages. And so when I toggle from my home over to purchasing, everything to do with purchasing then is pulled onto my page. Well, everything that I have access to, which in my case is everything. So this is where I work on vendors. I work on purchase orders. I work on paying entering my accounts payable and paying those bills. Well, I've got some things here like utilities and setup. I don't ever go into that stuff, so I want to take those off my page. So I can very quickly just get rid of those tiles, and same rule here is I can reorganize my page. So if I like things that I work on over here on the left, I could also make this a little bit larger, just like I did on my home page. But so this is where, if you do work in kind of the purchasing part of the system all day, some folks just move off their home page over to the area page that they work in, and then they have access to everything. And this is a little bit more efficient than trying to bring every menu option onto your home page. That kind of defeats the purpose of the shortcuts. But really the one thing that I wanted to show here is just how all of the data is hooked together. So I'm in the inquiry here. If I go into purchasing, this is what we call the all-in-one view here. And let me just grab a vendor here that has some data. And so you'll see here that when I grab this vendor, everything to do with this vendor is pulled onto one screen. So all the way back to a PO, the receiving of that purchase order, if I happen to use those, the invoice, payment, if there's a return, and any credit memos. And so if I want to see, for example, so here's a payment 328.06. Now remember, the blue means I can drill down, so I can drill back into that payment just by clicking on the blue here. And even though it's gray, I can take a look and see everything there is about that payment. Well, I might want to make some notes to it, so I can use a little notepad here, and I can put some notes onto the window, even though it's kind of posted and historical. I can always add documentation to it. Well, that's okay if I want to type, but really what I want to do is attach something. And so if I click on the paperclip there, I have my document attachment window here. I don't have any documents. You'll see I could attach something that is maybe out here on the network drive. And so maybe we'll just find something here. There's a W9, that's pretty harmless. And so I can bring those documents in. I do have a scanner hooked up today, and so you'll see the scan button here in the middle is open, and I could scan multiple pages directly into the window here and attach to the system. And so if I want to look at the document, I can preview it from, that opened on my other screen, preview the document right from inside of GP. And if that document gets deleted off the drive that I pulled it in from, perfectly okay. It's a permanent part of the Dynamics GP database now, and so it will never go away until I come in and say, you know what, I don't really need that anymore. I'm going to delete it. Now, I happen to have access through security to the deleted tab, so it puts the date and time stamp on the deletion here. Not all users might see this tab, and so sometimes people try to delete, or they do delete things that we don't want deleted. Well, they're tucked here until we actually then delete them off of the deleted tab, and then they do really go away. And so okay, so but the power of this window is not really the drill back, it's the hooks. And so if I check this payment and I want to see every invoice that was in that check, well, there was only one right here. Every receipt that invoice was, if I'm doing a 2- or 3-way match, so PO to receipt to invoice, so you can see right here that I have that match. And so I can drill back on the receipt, I could drill all the way back to the PO. And so this PO actually ended up on this check. And this is that's why it's called an all-in-one view, because everything is right there that we need. So if I wanted to do it from the PO side, maybe I don't know the payment side, but if I check the PO, well, that goes the other way then, goes to the right, shows me where that was received, where that was invoiced, and where that was paid. Now, in my little unperfect example here, or maybe I should say perfect example, I just have one PO to one receipt to one invoice to one check. Well, that's just coincidental. If if this invoice was paid on 2 different checks or 3 different checks, or maybe he had a credit and a return, all of those would be shown here as I tick off the different documents. So if I want to see what this return hooks to, well, this return was actually applied to this invoice. And so, and same thing with credit here. I can look back and see this credit memo actually was applied, looks like, to the same invoice. And so it's a very quick and easy way. You don't ever have to get up from your desk and dig through drawers and pull out papers and try to figure out, what matches what. All that stuff goes away because everything's right there on the screen. And so in the last couple of minutes, we'll just kind of toggle over to sales here just very quickly. This is the order entry system. So all of my ordering goes into one window, whether it's a quote, an order, an invoice, a return, or back order, all of that happens in one spot. And so let me just bring up an invoice here that I've kind of pre-put. So here's a simple invoice, customer specific pricing. It knows what price to pull based on the customer and the quantity. You can have quantity breaks where, if you sell more, then they pay less. Certain customers can have preferred pricing. Actually, every customer in the system can have their own price if it gets down to that. And so lots and lots of options here. What I wanted to show here was just the email capability. So first I'm going to print this just so you can kind of see what this invoice looks like. And as an option, we do render these documents, invoices, orders, quotes, back orders, and so forth in Word. POs also can be rendered out in Word if you like. And these just look a little nicer than what you would normally get out of a traditional report. And so, here I've added a logo. Looks like I've got it cut off there, but this is just an out-of-the-box invoice. I haven't touched it other than I did drop that logo into the space that they've reserved for the logo. But any of this can be changed. It's a Word document, so anything can be redone, relabeled, rearranged, totally up to you. This is just the way it looks kind of from Microsoft minus the logo. That's normally just a big empty space there. And so if I wanted to send that invoice out, so we're trying to get out of the printing business here, and I want to email this invoice, I've already put an email address in for this customer, and that happens to be me. And so this invoice will get generated and sent off, and the system will figure out that, oh, well, that really comes to me. And so I'll give that a few seconds to find me. And once it does, once that invoice comes in, then I'll show you that you get the exact same document from the email as what you would if you printed it in Word. So, and there it goes. We'll give it just a few minutes to find me now. So toggling back over to financial, journal entry screen. A lot of people want to see this. For whatever reason, it's very uneventful. Oh, there's the email that just came in just now. And so, and on my other screen again. And so here's the invoice in a nice PDF. Same Word document, just sent out now as a PDF document. And so, of course, you can add text to the body and whatever. I just didn't take the time to do that. I just attached the invoice, but you can have a whole body of information here, just like a normal email. So here, you could key an invoice in. The red fields are required, remember, and so lots of things that we have to do here. But keying that is sometimes okay, but sometimes we have information over in Excel that we want to get in as a journal entry and we don't want to key it. And so here, if I have just a simple entry in Excel and I just copy this, just simple copy and paste, and then I come over to the GP window and just click paste, you'll see that I have the ability to key that entry. Well, I say key, to copy and paste that entry right into my GP system. And so no need to, if I do have stuff in Excel, no need to go to the trouble of rekeying that as an entry in the system. So the last minute here, just a quick touch on fixed assets. Full fixed assets that's integrated with payables and purchase order. We can handle any kind of calculations, and so unlimited calculations, you'll see I've got kind of my internal calculation, which is what the general ledger is going to get updated with every month. I'm also tracking federal tax calculations and alternative minimum tax. People in California usually track a state tax because they have some different rules on depreciation than what the rest of the world does. And so lots of information happening here, but mostly generated by Dynamics. Nothing much that you have to key in, other than you just have to decide how many calculations you want to do. If you want to know how the system, not that one, if you want to know how the system is doing the calculation, you can drill down. You'll see these little blue arrows now on the screens. That just means there's more information back there. And so here you actually see what it's doing to get the depreciation. So you're never wondering, how to come up with that? That's not what I would have done. And so pretty robust asset tracking here. Of course, lots of other things. If you want to track for insurance coverage, you can do that. Also track leased assets, both capital and operating. And then, like many parts of the system, there's user-defined fields. Microsoft knows that they can't possibly think of everything that we want to tag on here in an asset. That's kind of a big area that there's other things that we want to do. And so, so that's a pretty quick runabout of some of what Dynamics GP does and looks and feels like. But Ashley, do we have any questions the last couple of minutes in the queue here, or do we have any that people would like to discuss quickly?
Yeah, we did get a couple questions. The first one is, do we need to have a full license to access the Business Analyzer, or do you have a viewer license with lower fees for upper management that want to see the KPIs but do not necessarily need GP access on a daily basis?
Great question. And while Ashley was chatting, you'll notice that I opened my business analyzer in another window. Now, the window that you're seeing open here, that's a newer version than the one that I'm running in GP. And so this is today's business analyzer, just same idea, just a lot more flashy. It's been updated quite a bit. And so, no, the business analyzer does not require a license whatsoever. Because you're accessing the SQL data, there is a SQL Server license that is needed, and you would have to have that when you log in. Those are fairly inexpensive, less than $200, depending on where you shop around online. Some typically in the $150 to $60 range. So you need a license to access your SQL data because you are making a connection now to the live database outside of GP, but no GP license required whatsoever if you just want to run the business analyzer on your phone or iPad, or in this case, I'm just running it as an app off my my computer. So very inexpensive to do, free app.
Great, thank you. And the next question is, what kind of data format needed for batch input? Can I enter batch transactions in CSV or XLS files?
Yep, good question. You can do that. There is an integration tool I didn't talk about, but let me just open it up here. And so here's a tool to integrate information. And so if you do have CSVs and, if you're doing journal entries, it's just as easy to copy and paste. But if you want to bring other things in, payables transactions is pretty popular, inventory items, GL accounts, vendor updates, vendor master information, fixed assets. These are all predefined integration points, and so this tool is available. It's not part of the core system, but which means you have to buy it extra. But yeah, very, very popular tool to import data in the system for sure.
Thank you. And that looks like that's all the questions that we got today. I'll be sending out an email with the recording. So if you guys do have more questions after this webinar, feel free to send those to us in the email that you receive.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Ashley. And yeah, any questions, just let us know. We're happy to jump back on. And if you want to drill into any part of the system in a little more detail, always happy to do that. No cost, no obligation, up to you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.